It's a wild one. Welcome to the program. All right. They're all hepped up on apple juice and M&Ms or something. Welcome to the program. Tonight I want to try to tie together some of the things that we've been talking about in the last couple of weeks. I want to talk to you a little bit about propaganda, the age of reason. Can man rule himself? That was the American experiment. Can man rule himself? The Constitution came out of that question. The founders said yes. Then someone asked the logical question. What is the logical question after you answer yes to this? How? How? That's where the Constitution came from. That's where they put it all together. Can man do it? He'd never done it before. Yes, he can. Yes, he can. But how? We have lost this. You ask most people, in fact, we should do this. Tiffany, next week, let's send cameras out to Times Square and ask people, what is the American experiment? I'll bet you no one can say, can man rule himself? But that's what it was. There are people that said no. They were the people that had said no forever. They were the institutions, the centers of power. They were the church and the rulers, the kings. That's who they were. And they stood in the way and they said, no, come to me, I have the answers. That's why Whitefield was so important in America. It's why our revolution ended the way it did and the French Revolution ended in bloodshed and chaos. Because we here answered to God. In France, they just rejected the church. Well, that's not the answer. That's not the answer. The answer is, maybe the church doesn't have the answer. Maybe if they're saying, no, don't read anything, just come to me, I'll give you the answer. That's about power. But if you have a direct relationship with God, and then you use reason, you start to see, wait a minute, there shouldn't be anyone over me. I was born free. I should be able to pursue my own happiness. I can rule myself. But how? I personally think that, this is my little solution, enlightenment, education, empowerment, and entrepreneurship. It's the 4 steps that I believe. But I don't think this is any different than what the founders did and said. They just didn't have a formula. The first part was Whitefield. Then you had the great people like Jefferson and really all of them, the Federalist Papers. How many people have even read the Federalist Papers? They all say the Constitution doesn't work, but have they read the Federalist Papers? Do you know when we passed health care, there wasn't a big discussion on it. There wasn't. It was arguing back and forth. Some of us tried to have a real discussion and say, no, but this part of healthcare makes no sense. Why is there limitations on the buying and selling of gold in the healthcare package? Why? No one had to justify any of it. But the founders said man can rule himself. They're educated. We'll make the case. It's called the Federalist Papers. They were in newspapers. And there were people who said we don't want the Constitution, and they had their argument against the Constitution and every single part of the Constitution. We don't do that anymore. They said man could be self-reliant if he was enlightened and educated. That way he would have he would be empowered and he would be able to do whatever it was that he thought would make him happy. Now, this went away for a long time in America. We got lost, I think, quite frankly, after Andrew Jackson. But it really was in the 20th century when things really started to go awry. And I found that the portal to the darkness of America for me was Woodrow Wilson. I hate this guy. Woodrow Wilson would answer that no. And he wasn't alone. He had a whole team of people around him. And we've never untangled ourselves from this thinking since. Tonight we're going to spend a little time with Edward Bernays. And Marvin Olasky, he is a guy who was a communist. And then he saw the light. And he went, holy cow, no, that's not the answer. That's not the answer. He actually found that while he was over in Russia. You'll meet him tonight. But history continues to repeat over and over and over again. Back around the turn of the century, during World War I, when Woodrow Wilson was in office here, the progressives, they were called the Fabian Socialists over in England. They had people in England, kind of like me, at the same time. They were saying, no, this isn't the answer. This is really a bad idea. Unlike me, this guy was probably more like Marvin. He dabbled with socialism. He looked into it. He thought, okay, let's look into it. He looked into communism, but he rejected it eventually. And he was more outspoken on fascism than anyone else in the UK in the 1930s, except perhaps for Winston Churchill. You know him as the guy who wrote The Jungle Book. He knew what was coming. He saw it. And he said, this is real trouble. And after World War I, he was so angry with what the Fabian Socialists and what those who said man cannot control himself, what they had done, the lies that they had told, and the destruction they had brought on to the entire country, but also the world. He decided that he was going to write a poem. I think this is quite possibly the most important poem I've ever read, because it tells us everything that is going to happen. I don't think this poem was written for his day. I think it was written for our day. It was written as a warning. And it's called The Gods of the Copybook Headings. The Gods of the Copybook Headings. Copybook headings. Anybody know what copybook headings were? Copybook headings were around the turn of the century, and some of us, I remember this, when we were in school, we would have at the top of our page, we would have something that was true, an axiom that was true. Water will wet us. And that was at the top of the page. And then to practice your letters, you would copy that. It was a copybook, and these were the headings. And there were always things that were true. Water will wet us. Fire will burn. You have to work, or you're a slave. Whatever the heading was, they were the things that we had learned over thousands of years that were true. Gods of the copybook headings. This is the God of the copybook heading. He used that as the premise of his poem. I want you to listen to this. I mean, we're going for those sexy ratings again. Let me read some poetry to you. Here it is. As I pass through my incarnations in every age and race, I make my proper prostrations to the gods of the marketplace. Peering through reverend fingers, I watch them flourish and fall. And the gods of the copybook headings, I notice, outlast them all. We were living in the trees when they met us. They showed us each in turn that water will certainly wet us and fire will certainly burn. But we found them lacking in uplift and vision and breadth of mind. So we left them to teach the gorillas as we followed the march of mankind. We moved as the Spirit listed. They never altered their pace, being neither cloud nor wind-born, like the gods of the marketplace. They always caught up with our progress, and presently word would come that a tribe had been wiped off its ice field or the lights had gone out in Rome, with the hopes that our world was built on that they were utterly out of touch. I mean, they denied that the moon was Stilton. They denied that she was even Dutch. They denied that wishes were horses. They denied that pigs had wings. So we worshipped the gods of the market, who promised us these beautiful things. When the Cambrian measures were forming, they promised perpetual peace. They swore if we just gave them our weapons, the wars of the tribes would cease. But when we disarmed, they sold us and delivered us bound to our foe. And the gods of the copybook headings said, stick to the devil you know. On the first feminine sandstones, we were promised a fuller life, which started out by loving our neighbor and ended by loving his wife. till our women had no more children, and the men had lost reason and faith. And the gods of the copybook heading said, the wages of sin is death. In the Carboniferous epoch, we were promised abundance for all by robbing selected Peter to pay for collective Paul. But though we had plenty of money, there wasn't anything our money could buy. And the gods of the copybook heading said, if you do not work, you will die. Then the gods of the marketplace tumbled, and their smooth-tongued wizards withdrew. And the hearts of the meanest were humbled, and began to believe that it was true, that all is not gold that glitters, and two do make four. And the gods of the copybook headings limped up to explain it once more. As it will be in the future, it was at the birth of man. There are only four things certain since social progress began: that the dog returns to his vomit, and the sow returns to her mire, and the burnt fool's bandaged finger, oh, it goes wobbling back to the fire. And after this is accomplished, and the brave new world begins, when all men are paid for existing, and no man pays for his sins, as surely as water will wet us, as surely as fire will burn. The gods of the copybook headings, with terror and slaughter, return. That's Rudyard Kipling. Rudyard Kipling did everything he could to wake his people up and say, don't go this way. He was crying out, be prepared, World War I is not going to be good. Nobody really listened to him. The question is, will we listen to him now? Because everything is there. They promised a fuller life. They promised us abundance for all. Though we had plenty of money, there was nothing our money could buy. What does that mean? We had plenty of money. Gang, we're about to have plenty of money, but there's nothing our money will be able to buy. If you have Chinese money, maybe. Maybe. The gods of the market tumbled. They already have. And the smooth-tongued wizards withdrew. Who are they? The people who are saying, oh, no, don't worry about it, everything's going to be fine. And the hearts of the meanest were humbled and began to believe it was true, that all is not gold that glitters. And two make four. What that means is, fix reason firmly in her seat. Facts are facts. Math is math. If you look at one more line. Till our women had no more children, and our men had lost reason and faith. What is happening to our families? Till our women have no more children, and our men no longer have reason. I've been saying on the air for the last 2 weeks, is reason dead? Is reason dead? You may not like me. You may think that I'm a horrible human being, whatever. I don't really care. I don't care. I don't ask you to like me. I don't ask you to trust me. I ask you to engage and use reason. I ask you to find out if these things that I tell you every night are true. You don't have to like the messenger. You just have to use reason. Because the only way this can happen is if man is enlightened and he educates himself. The way you start education is asking this question: how? How? How did this happen? Has this happened before? How is this going to work? How can man rule himself? Tonight, we're going to answer this one question: how? How did we get here? And how is it that we never saw this coming? We'll do that next. As we did some research on a show we did, I don't know, last week or the week before on Edward Bernays, we went for some of our studies to this book, Corporate Public Relations, A New Historic Perspective. The author is Marvin Olasky. He's the editor-in-chief of World Magazine, and he actually interviewed Bernays in 1984. How old was he then?
92.
92. And this is, I don't want to make this into it's not another Bernays special. It's to show you how things are being done right now based on his 4 principles. That man, and really this is part of his uncle's idea of, you know, Sigmund Freud.
Uncle Sigmund, yes.
That it was sex. Men are only driven. Man cannot rule himself, right? And so we have to herd him, put him in a corral, which is, I think, a word he actually used in one of the quotes I read in your book. Mm-hmm. You got to put man in a corral, and the elites will just dictate to him.
You do it for his own good.
Yeah.
That's the idea.
Sure. Enlightened despotism. So the 4 things are sex, self-preservation, aggression, and security. Okay, so we'll go into that, and I'll show you in a minute how this is all being used today, so you can use reason when you see things back and forth, and you know where the roots are, you know where it comes from. But I want to start someplace else. I want to go back to, can man rule himself, and show the difference between the progressives, the way they answer that question, and the way the founders answer that question. So go ahead.
Sure.
Have at it. He was like, Marvin said, could I use your chalkboard?
Get a chance to use the chalkboard.
Be careful.
Right.
I'll tell the chalkboard later. It's okay. I'm not cheating on you with another professor.
Okay, I'll start with a triangle. Kind of like a triangle. This is the way the founders understood things. They understood that you wanted to slow things down, give people plenty of time to think things through. So they had, at the start, 3 different groups or individuals involved in discussing legislation and what to do. You have the president here. He'd be involved in this whole process. The president, in a way, was a little bit like a king, but a king with a very limited term of office and very limited powers. You have the Senate, which is kind of like an aristocratic body. They would be voted on, elected by state legislatures. They would be considering, deliberating over all the measures that were being discussed.
That was different back when the founders put it together. This is a progressive change. The Senate was originally put in, not by the voters of the people. That's why you have so much money going into, like, let's say, Chris Dodd's campaign from all over the country, because the rest of the country is interested. The founders knew that. And they said the Senate needs to be appointed by the state legislature. And it was like that to protect exactly that it didn't become a United States senator. It was the interest of the state. And the progressives changed that about, what,
1913 or
1913,
so,
yeah.
During the Wilson administration.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And let me just mention one other change. The Senate had a little institution called the filibuster. The filibuster was one person could actually stop legislation, slow it down, give people a chance to consider, to think it through. If any of you saw Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, for example, that's what the filibuster was, one person standing up, perhaps against everyone else. And then, of course, you have the House of Representatives, in a sense, a representation of democracy of the people. So you have a mixed government. You have these 3 aspects. Slow it down, think it through. And let's say that some powerful individual arises and he can get, let's say he's the president, he can get the Senate and the House to do his will. You throw a rope around the whole thing. The Supreme Court. Again, opportunity to reconsider, slow it down, think it through, don't rush, don't panic. In case the Supreme Court doesn't come through, you have another rope around the whole thing. And these were the state legislatures, at a time when the state legislatures actually had a lot of authority, and the idea was everything, you didn't go to Washington for everything, you actually went to Springfield or Annapolis or other state capitals. And then here's what, as a journalism professor for many years, I really enjoy doing. The final check in this check and balance system is a free press. And this is why we have the First Amendment. This is why journalists actually have certain special rights, because they were considered as very, very important to keep dictators from having their way.
Did the president at the time of the founding, did he have an executive power? He could just make an executive order?
No, executive orders, no. This is why you have Congress. Congress does things. You don't do executive orders.
Watch this, America. Here's how they have changed this. Through executive order, they've changed his role. They've changed the filibuster, and they've changed the Senate, the protection of each state. Then the circle is the Supreme Court, and that's still there. Then you have the circle of, what was the second one?
State legislation.
State, which, because of Wilson administration, that's now gone. And you see the media not doing their job. And all infiltrated and all done starting around the turn of the century.
Sure.
Okay.
And growing throughout the whole century until we get to the point where you can have a bill that's a huge number of pages and people will pass it without even reading it, and we're all told, well, we'll tell you about it once we pass it. We'll tell you what's in it once it's already legislation. That's not the way the founders intended things to be. Here's the system essentially that we work under now, and here's where Edward Bernays had a big effect in helping to develop the idea of public relations or propaganda. Right now, you have the idea that people in fact cannot rule themselves. Well, here, I'll do little drawings here. Here's a person, and he's frowning. He's very unhappy. Here are other people, and in fact, they're screaming. What? The sky is falling. We can't do anything. We're helpless. Help us. It's an emergency. We must do something right away. We don't know what to do. I could draw more little people, but you would, of course, you'd tell me, don't give up your day job, and so forth. There's chaos, in other words. But, oh, happy day. We have, and this is what Edward Bernays, the founder of public relations, called a human God. Bernays was an atheist. He believed that there is no God, there is no providence, there's no one to help us. We have to invent human gods, and we have to pledge our allegiance to them.
When you listen to this, think of George Soros, the episode we did on George Soros, who in his own words has said, I'm like a human god, I'm a god, and I'm experimenting.
But the human gods are not necessarily the brightest people around. They're not necessarily the people who really understand anything to do. They may be very good-looking people. They may be athletic people. They may be stars in a lot of ways, but they're not the ones who are really deciding how we should live, what we should do. And this is Edward Bernays. Above the human gods, you basically have manipulators. You have Bernays himself, who, as we'll talk about, was involved in a whole lot of things to change how people lived, how people ate, who you voted for. Right.
And this is the Cass Sunsteins of the world now. They're the ones who say a little bit of Homer Simpson exists in everybody and we can manipulate him. Or as Bernays said, I love this, it might be better to have instead of propaganda and special pleading, committees of wise men who would choose our rulers, dictate our conduct, private and public, decide upon what best type of clothes for us to wear and the best kind of food for us to eat. Broccoli, no trans fats. I mean, you're seeing it. You're seeing it now. And when we come back, we're going to show you how politicians in Washington use one of the 4 ways to herd people as cows. Security, and get them to do amazing things. Back in a second.
Our economy is in a crisis.
If we drag our feet and fail to act, this crisis could turn into a catastrophe.
This legislation will lead to healthier lives.
Legislation that will provide stability and security for Americans who have insurance, quality, affordable options for those who don't.
The Green Revolution is the solution to the financial crisis, the national security crisis.
Childhood obesity isn't just a public health issue, it is a national security threat as well.
Our kids are running out of time. It's critically important to the health and success of our kids.
You get sick, America. The Republican health care plan is this: die quickly.
The planet has a fever.
The threat from climate change is serious, it is urgent, and it is growing. If we did not act, we might face a second depression. So we acted immediately and aggressively. These numbers demand action. Now is the time for Congress to act. Too many of you not only can't afford to provide health insurance to your employees, too many of you are having a tough time just affording health insurance for yourselves.
If you could see the effect we are having on our planet, you'd do something about it.
Tick, 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 tick. Our future is up to you.
We face a convergence of crises, all of which are a concern for life.
I think the stimulus package is well conceived. A lot of it puts money in people's hands.
We need a big stimulus package that will jolt the economy back into shape.
There is a serious crisis here. It's as if, you know, the patient's arteries are clogged and he'll get a heart attack unless we do something.
You know what, guys? If you eat all of these healthy foods, you're going to grow up to be big and strong, just like me.
We're talking with Marvin Orlasky. He is the editor-in-chief of World Magazine. He interviewed Bernays, Edward Bernays, the father of propaganda, which later became public relations. And what caught my eye is how everybody is asking for chaos. Everybody who wants a revolution or wants violence wants chaos. Mm-hmm. And his public relations theory, I love, the name of it is Order Out of Chaos.
Or never let a good crisis go to waste.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing. Let me, sorry, I want to go to the audience because they have, quite honestly, I think they have many of my questions. But let me start here. I have to ask you, first of all, you were a communist, right?
I was.
Okay, and you went over to Russia and...
in 1972.
Okay, so you were like full-fledged, you were Bill Ayers era.
Yeah.
Yeah, were you into the whole revolution, take down the state, and... Yeah.
In a different way than Bill Ayers, but parallel.
Very few people, thank God, that are like Bill Ayers. You went over, had an awakening, and said, wow, this is tripe.
Yeah, actually, and here's the sad thing, it was a delayed awakening. When I was there, I saw problems, but I always tried to figure out a way to justify it. But it really wasn't until I started reading the Bible and thinking things through that I saw, here's the alternative.
So you had enlightenment.
Indeed.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so, but you are also known kind of as the godfather of the idea of compassionate conservatism.
I guess that's true.
Which I'm not a fan of.
Right.
Because conservatives, I would say that Ben Franklin was a conservative who came out and said the best way to help people is make them uncomfortable in their poverty. And yet he started the first public hospital. So he was wildly conservative. He just didn't think it should be done through the government.
Yeah.
And sometimes pain is the best way to help people who won't help themselves.
Yeah.
How do you, you just said this, you're a small government guy, you're not a progressive?
No.
Okay. How did you get to compassionate conservatism, which is...
Well, because compassionate conservatism is supposed to be, and originally it was in the 90s as we were developing the theory, it's decentralizing. It's Benjamin Franklin. It's people, well, the hospitals, as you know, were largely created by Christians.
Right.
That's where it started. It wasn't government.
So it was decentralizing, but that's not really what it turned into.
No, the idea was to empower individuals in their communities groups of people, church groups, civic groups, other groups, to empower them to develop projects together that would help and get government out of the way. That was the idea of compassionate conservatism.
Right.
That's why it wasn't compassionate liberalism.
Right. You met with Bernays. Mm-hmm. He was in his 90s. You also have met with Jim Wallace.
Sure.
And you speak the same language. He's a Marxist. You're a former Marxist, so you speak the same language. Right. He is a guy who says, because, again, the early progressives went right into the churches, and he's a guy who says, you know, I'm a hater, etc., etc., and Jesus, the gospel, is about Marxism. It is, his quote, absolutely about redistribution of wealth. Mm-hmm. When you spoke to him, does he believe that?
Oh, I think he does believe it. He says that social justice is a biblical concept, and it's not. If you read the Bible, justice is used in, well, there are basically three emphases there. Number one, justice is used together with righteousness. The two Hebrew words go together. That's number one, justice and righteousness. So these are God's laws. This isn't just some social justice thing that we invent, deciding this will be good for people. We try to look at the Bible and learn from that. That's number one.
So do you think, for instance, Van Jones was red, and through his redness he found green, and green is the new red. And I don't think Van Jones really believes in the green movement, other than he believes that it is, in his words, again, taking us from the old gray capitalism into a green capitalism, and it won't stop there, meaning red. So I don't think he really actually believes in whatever. Do you think that these guys really believe, or like you, convince themselves to believe because it's a vehicle, like the churches, it's a vehicle to get them down? Because there's no Marxist that is God-fearing. I mean, right. What Marxist believes in God? Did you?
I did not believe in God.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So you can't, because otherwise you'd have reason and enlightenment, and you'd say man should rule himself. Back in a minute.
Okay, it's 5 p.m. I gotta finish this conference call, I gotta walk the dog, I'm stuck on the crane, need to make dinner. Did you pick up the kids from soccer practice yet? There's no time to watch this show now. Hey, it's okay. Just do what Glenn does. DVR it. Then, like Glenn, you can watch it late night on your couch with a scoop, well, actually a pint. Okay, a gallon of Grater's ice cream. Set your DVR for Glenn Beck, 5 p.m. every day.
We're back with Marvin Olasky. He's the editor-in-chief of World Magazine. He interviewed Bernays in 1984. He was a former communist and now believes man can rule himself. I want to talk to Joanne, who had, I think, almost my question.
My question, Glenn, was, if the only way to combat propaganda is through the truth, and we're not being taught the truth in school, and we're not being told the truth by the media or by our politicians, how do we expect to defeat propaganda?
I'm going to let Marvin answer that, and then I'll give you mine, because I have an answer, but I'd like to hear Marvin's.
Well, that's a great question, because it really is all about truth. And if we don't teach the truth, if we don't know the truth, then we're going to be slaves to whatever propagandist comes along and plays off our fears and makes us feel very afraid and thus ready to give him anything he wants. Who are we? We are people created to worship in some way. And if we don't worship God, we're going to worship the human gods created by people like Bernays.
Here, this is the message, and the founders were very clear that, hey, whatever you have to be a God-fearing and virtuous people. Have to. And they were very clear on that. But that goes to the enlightenment part, and also reason. When Jefferson said, fix reason firmly in her seat and question the very existence of God, I have applied that to not just God, but everything. If you want to battle this, if you want to be able to rule yourself, you can't believe all those magazine covers. You can't be spoon-fed anything. That's why I always say on this program, question me. Don't take my word for it. Go do the homework yourself. Each individual must know what is true Each individual must know it for themselves, not because somebody else you trust told you that. It's the only way the system works. If you are enlightened and you know, hey, I can get the answer, I'm smart. That's why everybody in media always tries to make the Tea Party or anyone who disagrees with the elite stupid. You're stupid. No, you're not. Empower yourself. You're not stupid. Then educate yourself. Do I have time for one more question? Real quick? No, take a break. Right back.
Don't pay any attention to those crazy people on TV.
Don't hate me because I'm so sexy. Refreshing, isn't it?
Wrap your head in duct tape, because it's going to explode.
America, I'm going to shoot straight with you. We have some cockroaches to expose tonight. Rather tasty.
Oh, that's rich.
We're just getting started. We're talking about, can man rule himself? This should be the debate in America. Can man rule himself? If so, yes. If not, who rules him? What is the system? Marvin Olasky, he's the editor-in-chief of World Magazine. He interviewed Edward Bernays back in 1984. Jim Wallace, he was a former communist. He's seen it from the inside and believed it for a while and has a unique take on it. Let me go to Fern, who's from New York City. Hi, Fern. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Very good.
My question was, where are you seeing the greatest influence today of Bernays' teaching, of his propaganda?
Where's his greatest influence? I think Cass Sunstein. I mean, his greatest influence it's very strange, because Bernays isn't necessarily, and I don't know if you'd agree with this, a bad man. And I don't know if any of these guys are bad men. They just believe you're stupid. And that's not what the founders did. So his greatest influence was in media. Everybody used him. You were at his house.
Sure.
When you brought anything up, what did he do?
Here's a fellow who's 92, still very intellectually sharp, and if I mentioned someone, just about anyone, he would run to a photo on the wall of that person and himself. And if I asked about something, he would dash to his file cabinet. He knew where everything was. He'd pull out a paper or something, an envelope, something from that person.
Do you remember the episode I did a couple of weeks ago where I said the 20th century, I think, is the big lie? His influence is so pervasive. It's in everything. And it's not necessarily bad, but it's in everything. It's why we have Christmas the way we do. It's why we have celebrities the way we do. It's why we have smoking the way we do. It's why the politicians flip the flapjacks on the road and wear the hunting jackets. It's in everything. Where is he most dangerous today? I think he's most dangerous in all of these things if you're uneducated. If you're educated, you know it's a scam. You know. But you have to do that. Patrina, go ahead.
How do you deal with the sense of powerlessness and sadness at seeing, these people succeed in creating a different climate for the United States and pushing forth their agenda, and there's nothing you could do to hold it back?
There is. Let me answer that on the back. We have to take a break, and I want to answer that question when we come back. Before we went to break, Katrina asked the question, how do you deal with the sadness of seeing all this stuff happening and knowing that it's basically an out-of-control machine that you're not going to be able to stop? Believe it or not, before we went on the air, I kind of asked Marvin the same kind of question. Will we survive? Can it be undone? And he had exactly the same answer I do. Yes, it can be undone, but not in the conventional way. I've read enough about the founders. I know how it was put together, and we are no different than the founders. We just have to order them. We just have to put it all in order. We have to enlighten ourselves, educate ourselves, empower ourselves, and then be creators. That is the solution. And I know it sounds silly, but it's not about guns, it's not about politics, it's nothing else. It's that. And that's how we change the world. That's the way the founders did it. From New York, good night, America.